Hello, Mrs. Mulchaney here again, here to go over Unit 6. So make sure you add at the very front of your notebook that Unit 6 information with SOL 6.3, and we're going over A, B, and C this unit. And our first lesson is going to be for Intro to Integers. So once you have that copied in the front of your notebook, you can turn some pages until you start running into some blank pages. Remember, the spiral is going to be down through the middle, and you're going to write Unit 6 Integer Basics. And then remember, you can fold over that corner so that you can find Unit 6 easily. All right, so our first notes for integers. Go ahead, pause, write all these in, and then I'm going to go over them. So if we talk about integers, integers are the set of whole numbers and their opposites. So whole numbers can be either positive or they can be negative, but they have to still be a whole number in order to be an integer. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So a positive integer is a number that is greater than 0. So all the numbers that we've traditionally talked about in math, 5, 6, 7, 25, 13. A negative integer is a number that is less than 0. So I want you to think about in your head, what would be a number that would be less than 0? Well, it can't be 1 because 1's not less than 0. Those would be your negative numbers, which are like -1, -2, -17. And then we can put our positive ones up here, 5, 6, and 12. Sure. And just a special note to yourself, 0 is not positive or negative, and it has no opposites. So 0 is just 0 when we look at the number line on the next page. You'll see it falls right in the middle of our number line. So draw yourself a quick little number line across your page, right underneath your notes. And we're going to fill in this number line. So 0 is always going to be right in the middle. And the upper numbers of a number line are going to be your positive numbers. So 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are your positive numbers. Everything that direction is positive. And then we can do our numbers down here. And those are -1, -2, -3, and -4. Those are going to be all your negative numbers. So your negative is always going to be to the left, and your positive is always going to go to the right. And then always remember that 0 falls in the middle. So let's talk about these numbers and sort them as to positive or negative. So this little sign in front of this 12 is telling me that that is a -12. So -12 will go here. And because 7 doesn't have a sign on it, I'm going to assume that it is positive. So 7 is our first positive number. So I want you to take a second, see if you can sort the rest of those into positive and negative. So 14 would be positive, -9 would be negative, -22 would be negative, 17 would be positive, 29 would be positive, 50 would be positive, -1 would be negative, and 4 would be positive. All right, so integers can only be whole numbers or fractions that divide to be whole numbers. So this comes back to our definition of an integer. It's either a positive or a negative whole number. But sometimes those fractions can be tricky. So if we look at these examples, I have 10 over 2. Well, I can simplify 10 over 2, divide by 2, and I can get 5 over 1, which is the same as just 5. You could also think about this as 10 divided by 2, because a fraction bar means division, which is the same as 5. 5 is a whole number, so this one is an integer. Whereas if I look at 1/2, I can't simplify it. And if I divide 1 divided by 2, I get 0.5, which is a decimal. And a decimal cannot be an integer. So it has to be a whole number. It cannot be a decimal. So let's sort these numbers as to integers or not integers. So remember, an integer can be either a positive or negative whole number. So like -5, -5 would be an integer. But this 2.5, that's a decimal, so that one is not an integer. So go ahead and take a second, see if you can sort the rest of those numbers as to integer or not an integer. So -4.8, because 4.8 is a decimal, it automatically becomes not an integer, even though it's negative. 8/4, if I do 8 divided by 4, I end up with 2, which is a whole number. So that would make this fraction of 8/4 an integer. The whole number 4 is an integer. Now 1/3 would be 1 divided by 3, which comes out to be a decimal of 0.3 repeating. So 1/3 is not an integer. 3.1 is a decimal, so that is not an integer. -3 is a whole number, so that is an integer, and then 7 is an integer because it's a whole number. Now talking about those opposite integers, go ahead and take a pause if you need to write this in before I move on. So opposite integers are the same distance on the number line from 0. So let's fill in our number line real quick. So remember, we're going to put 0 in the middle. And anytime we're working with integers, it's a really good idea to make yourself a quick number line. So I have 0, and then I'm going to do my positives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And label them. And then I'm going to do my negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And remember that your -1 is always going to be closest to 0, so you actually number them backwards. When you're doing your number line. So -1 doesn't start the furthest to the left. -1 has to start right beside the 0. So it'll make a little bit more sense when we start talking about the opposites, and I'm going to change my color here. So my opposite of -3. So here's -3 on the number line. And if I count -3, it says it should be the same distance from 0. So -3 would be 1, 2, 3 spaces away. So the opposite of -3 would then be 3 spaces the other direction of 0, which would just be 1, 2, 3. So the opposite of -3 would be +3. Okay, looking at that again. What would the opposite of 4 be? Well, here's 4 on the number line. Here's 0. If I count 4, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. For +4, now I need to do the opposite, which would be 4 the other side of 0. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's -4. Go ahead and see if you can do number 3 and number 4 on your own. So the opposite of -7 would be +7, because they would both be 7 spaces from 0. And the opposite of +8 would be -8. So we can use integer words to describe real world situations. So in the real world, we actually use words to tell us if numbers are positive or negative. We don't just walk around and we say, oh, that was -5 to my bank account. Well, no, we don't say things like that whenever we're talking about integers. We'll say that, oh, well, we spent $5 or I gave away $5. Those are different versions of saying -$5. So I want to equate this really quick to just a little picture. So we're going to draw a picture of the sea, and we're going to start by drawing a cliff. So there's my beautiful cliff. And on my cliff, it's meeting the ocean or the sea. So I'm going to draw the ocean waves going across my page. And in my ocean, there are some fish that swim. Beautiful little fish. And in the sky and at my beach or my ocean, there's birds that fly. So I can remember that's the air. If you want to draw a little cloud, you could draw a cloud. Everything's happy. Okay, so now that we have our cute little picture drawn, let's talk about how this relates to math. So we could think about our cliff as a number line. Okay, and where the ocean is meeting the cliff is going to represent a number. And that number is going to be 0. Now, where the water meets the cliff, or where 0 is on the number line, has a special name, and that can be called sea level. On the earth, you'll hear like Mount Everest is so many feet above sea level. The Marianas Trench is so many feet below sea level. So sea level is right where the sea meets the land on any of the continents. So that's where 0 stands. Now, any numbers that are above sea level are going to be your positives. So this would be like +1, +2, +3, +4, and so on. Now, when we're talking about below sea level, we're going underwater. So that would be below, and that's going to be your negatives. So we have -1 and -2 and -3 and -4. So that's just a quick picture to help you represent where everything is. If I'm going above the sea, I'm positive. If I'm going below the sea, it's negative. And just remember that that sea level, if you ever see sea level, is referring to 0. So let's do some problems with some of our keywords that we've been talking about a little bit. And I want you to pause and go ahead and write these down first. So if I look at problem number 1, it says 4 feet above sea level, and I'm going to highlight what my key word is there. I'm seeing above, and I'm also seeing above sea level. And I know that sea level is 0. So if I'm above sea level, that's going to give me a +4. For number 2, I have 6 feet below sea level, so my keywords there are below sea level. And sea level, like we talked on the other page, was 0. So if I'm below sea level, that means I am in the negatives. So this would be a -6. For number 3, I have a drop of 3 degrees. Well, think about what's happening. If I'm dropping 3 degrees, am I going up 3 degrees or am I going down? Well, if I'm dropping, that means I'm going down. So that's my key word there is drop 3. So that's going to give me a -3. Now, number 4 is a tricky word, especially if you don't deal with money a lot. a deposit of $500. So a deposit, and that's your keyword, means when you're putting money into your bank account. You can also think of the word deposit. I'm going to rewrite it as depositive. So you could think of it like that. Deposit is depositive. So that's telling me this is positive 500. Number 5, I owe the cafeteria. So your keyword there is owe. And if I owe somebody money, that means I have a negative number, so that's -5. The next one, the keyword there is gain, a gain of 16 yards. So that means I'm going up 16 yards, or I'm getting them back, so that's a positive 16. And then the last one is a tricky one, a withdrawal of $10 from my bank account. So withdraw is your key word there. And if I withdraw something, I take it away. So I'm taking money out of my bank account, so that is going to be a negative amount to my bank account. I have to take out $10. All right, last little bit, let's just document some of these keywords that we've been talking about. And this will be a working document where you can add words to this as you go. So just some words that we've been talking about include receives, deposit, warmer, rose, increase, profit, gain, add, extra, ascends, and credit. So those are some examples of positive words, and we can add to this as we continue to go. Some negative words include spend, withdraw, deducts, loss, colder, beneath, change, debt, owe, write a check. So if you ever hear somebody writing a check, and then charge. So these are just some examples of keywords, and we're going to continue to work on these and add to this list. But make sure if you have any questions about integers, you be sure to let your teacher know. Thank you for your time.